What's good, everybody? My name is Alckemy. Welcome to the channel. Today we're going to be responding to a comment that I got in my 20k post, which we're not there yet, but we're getting closer and closer every day. I basically said, hey, what do you all want to see? I would like to know what kind of videos I could potentially do, and one of the things that I got was noisia neuro videos using Serum. So I don't actually make videos on how to sound like other artists anymore, especially noisia, because they've got a Patreon. So go sign up to their thing and learn exactly how to do what it is that they're doing. The other thing that I think is really interesting to discuss is the idea of taking concepts of other synthesizers and being able to apply it to, you know, other programs. So the stuff that I'm going to be covering today within Serum as a whole is really like not so different than what I would be doing in Faceplant, and I'll show you some parallels and whatnot. But whenever you watch a sound design tutorial, try to focus on the mechanics of what it is that they're doing, as opposed to, well, how do I recreate that exact sound? Or, oh, this is so exclusive, they're using this synth, so I got to use this synth, because that's just not true. So let's talk about something very simple when it comes into neurobasses as a whole. We are going to start with Faceplant, but we are going to transition into doing some kind of sound in Serum from scratch. But this is going to be a long video because I'm going to be exploring, and I'm going to kind of talk somebody through a lot of Serum stuff in case if they don't have Faceplant. Saw wave, detuned, right? Two voices, and then something very simple like a notch filter, and maybe we'll make this a little bit thicker, and then we go into distortion, limited, right? If I were to detune this, this is the basis of every single neuro bass. You don't have to use saw waves, you don't even have to use a notch, but detuned waveforms as a whole with a good fundamental is generally how we go about these things. So fast forward, or rather go back in time to something like Serum. This is where we get into, I mean, really how I learned how to do all this stuff in the first place. I've been using Serum for almost a decade now. I think it came out in 2014, and I bought it as soon as it came out because I was like, oh, you can make your own wavetable, that's sick. But if you look here, you're going to notice that there are going to be some differences between the two, but that just kind of goes into experience over time, and we're going to figure out how to fix it. But basically, if I detune two waveforms here, it's going to sound a little bit different. And the thing that you need to realize with this is that every single synthesizer is going to sound a little bit different because of the algorithms that they have and the way that they generate sound. But in this particular case, this is actually a kind of hidden thing that if you turn the width off of the oscillator, now we've actually got that same detuning that we're talking about. So again, if I go into this and I go normal, we go into our notch, we turn this on, let's maybe do like a 24 just to be a little bit thicker, and we move this over here. Great, now we add some distortion. Turn on the pitch bend. Then we have gained another starting point on which to start building things off of. Now, does it sound different? Yes, but it's not about how do I make this sound the same. It's about what kind of sound am I making, and that's like the biggest point that I'm trying to drive home with this. Because just because, like, you know what I'm saying, like just because we're, how do you say, like using something that maybe doesn't have the same timbre or whatever, doesn't mean that we can't still get something cool. It just means that we need to explore the options that are exclusive to something like Serum or something like Faceplant. And in this case, unfortunately with Serum, and this is why I don't really cover it anymore, it's limited on effects. So I guess you could be that guy and be like, well, if you're a really good sound designer, then you would only be using and making every single thing inside of Serum and making it work or whatever. But you know what? Like, this is 2023 and my computer is way too strong for that. And I have put way too much money in this for me to feel like I need to do that. It's whatever gets the result. It's whatever helps you get to where you need to be. Don't be one of those people that gatekeep. It just annoys the hell out of me. And yeah, anyways, sorry. So with this though, let's go ahead and drive this a bit. Oh, okay, well suddenly it's starting to sound a little bit more fat. Okay, well, from this point, unfortunately, we don't have a whole lot of options in which to start morphing the sound, but the thing that I would reach for personally before anything else, I don't know why I'm doing the hand gestures and stuff, is filtering. So with that, there's a lot of different stuff that we can get through there, but even if you were to just take this as a whole and... Right, there's quite a bit that you can do with just a low pass filter, and 9 times out of 10 I end up doing something with a low pass filter at the end of the chain anyways. So if I were to grab something like this, maybe it would be lovely if there was a randomized there or something, but we can use a miscellaneous thing, a bit crazy. We can set it to be relatively slow, make sure that some of these peaks hit above, and I'm gonna make another clip here just to kind of like leave this open for a sec, and then change this rate into off. And then I will send this into a little bit lower. So now one thing that you can also do with this is you can actually grab a note here to the speed. And on top of that, you unfortunately have to go into the matrix, but we can go into pitch bend. So that way it covers both. And we can go into the LFO and go to the rate, and then we can increase that rate. So obviously that's freaking insane. So what we might want to do is pull down on the pitch bend. Now, whenever we play with this, we can so in theory, like from just having this sound, we could just try to make it sound cooler and stuff. I mean, we could go into something like an OTT if we wanted to, use some multiband and pull down the threshold. This is going to make it really loud. One thing that I would suggest is, it's weird. So something that you'll find that's interesting is that if you use the distortion and you use soft clipping, then this will actually clip the signal. It will essentially limit it. I suppose that you could try to pull this down and go into limit mode, I believe, or sorry, it's a limit, I think, if you pull the ratio all the way up, but I don't think that this actually does true limiting, if I'm not mistaken. Nope, it does not. So don't be don't be fooled. But if you do use distortion at the end of your chain and you set this to something like soft clip, let's go hard clip, and you set this to post and you try to pull this all the way up, two things are going to happen. One is you're going to notice that this will clip the signal. The other thing is that it's actually like going to usually affect the sound in a weird, sometimes not so pleasant way, because this filter is definitely being activated. So if I were to turn this off, it's relatively transparent, so you can kind of mess with it or whatever, do what you want. And for whatever reason, if you need more filters, then I suppose you could do something like this to where, no, sorry, we're going to use the same one. Hold on 1 second, go back into the matrix. I know that there was a way to do this. I don't remember how though. I haven't used Serum in forever, but whatever, we'll just keep this here and pull down on this guy and adjust that there. Cool. So now that we have this though, this opens up some new doors for us to use maybe multi-filters and stuff, maybe a high pass notch or a peak notch, something of the sort. And what we're going to try to accomplish with this one in particular is setting a frequency range somewhere in the mids. And the reason why we want to use mids is because if we were to just do a quick demonstration here, if I pull this up around the low mid band, this is something that I got from Frequent, and I sweep along somewhere around this region, you're going to hear that with that, that's where the monster sounds are. If you sweep around this region, this is where the tipper squelchy sounds are. And it also depends on what it is that you're doing, but long story short, what we're really trying to get after here is we're trying to set up some kind of complex filtering thing, kind of like, I don't know, a mixture of relatively wide boosts and notches, something like this of the sort. And these days I make these move all together, but I guess when we're doing stuff within Serum, and you can make them move all together as well, but basically we're just kind of getting it to do something like this and do some interesting movement patterns or whatever. It doesn't matter if they all move against each other or whatever. It's just kind of targeting the key places in order for filtering as a whole. You can learn more about that on my masterclasses and stuff. But for this, I think that really what we're trying to do is just accomplish getting some general movement and focusing on hitting those sweet spots. So it's not going to sound like super, I guess, compelling just because Serum stuff is weird, and it also doesn't really give you an indicator. You kind of have to like guesstimate it because it's just knobs. Like if you grab this, it will tell you, yeah, this is a percentage. So this is the only thing that actually tells you what frequency range to start from. So honestly, a lot of the work that you're doing if you're trying to get complex filtering is going to be through here of just like, how's this, how's this, how's this, trial and error, if you will. So the next thing that we can do, you'll notice that I turned the mix down a little bit because we were cutting a little bit too much of the sound. You can add a clipper at the end of this or limit it, doesn't really matter. But we can use some of these things in order to get some more movement. So the first thing I would reach for is using an EQ as a filter, because what we can do is use a boost and a notch. How convenient. And we can, again, kind of just find that range around that, you know, anywhere from like 150 to like 800, I think would be more than sufficient to give you some interesting results. So let's go ahead and move this kind of up. And then what we'll do is we'll move this in the opposite way. And now from this, we can kind of play around with some of the other options that will kind of help characterize the sound, if you will. So we have chorus, phaser, flanger, delay, hybrid dimension, whatever. But keep in mind that because we're sending the entire signal into the effects chain, then that means that it's going to be affecting our sub. So something that you might want to try, you don't have to do this, but one thing that people do is they'll remove the fundamental. And what that means is it takes away the sub. And so this allows you to support a clean sub and have zero phase issues or whatever. I don't necessarily find that that's super necessary. You can if you want to, but I don't think that it's that big of a deal, to be honest. I don't know, it depends. Just use your best judgment and listen to how it sounds, check for phase cancellation and all that. But we can support this with its own sub, and it doesn't even have to be at 100%. We can kind of just give it a little bit of juice, if you will. Yeah, so we can maybe even reduce this. And again, we're not trying to overpower this. We're kind of just trying to add in some supportive low end to it. That sounds like garbage. We'll come back to that in a second. But yeah, so now that we have something like that, we can color this more. So if we wanted to, we can play with some movement on the chorus. So one thing I can do is just modulate the mix here. And you want to set this delay to be like really slow, or sorry, like really fast, and then adjust the rate to, I don't know, somewhere around here is usually fine. There we go. And basically we've kind of built a relatively like large sound, if you will. We can also make this quote unquote talk more by playing with the frequency here around, again, that mid region. So I'm just going to overdo it for a second with 100% mix. I'm going to turn this down a little bit too. But as you can tell, it gives it just a little bit more interest, if you will. So, I mean, on this, I guess the only thing that we can do to kind of push this a little further, I mean, and we can use every single effect on here. I don't really think that you need to do that in order to like maximize your patch or whatever. But even if you were to just do something kind of like this, kind of like that, that'll make it a little bit wider, if you will. But I mean, even then it's a bit much. So you really want to be kind of reserved with this. We can use a flanger, we can use delay. Sometimes setting and modulating a really short delay can be helpful. So you can pick a frequency range around here, turn the BPM off, turn the link on. You could do a Haas effect if you want to by having one go a little bit different than the other. But what you can do is set a relatively moderate feedback and just mess with the mix here and then play around with where it is in the chain. So I'd probably put it before the filtering. I'd also pull the hyper dimension after all this stuff, right before we get into the distortion. I don't want to color or like widen the sound while I'm trying to do like filtering and distortion and shaping with this. But you know, who's to say? Like, I'd say just explore and do what you want, because it really doesn't matter at the end of the day. But so what we might also want to do is with that frequency range on that pitch bend, wherever that is, we might want to adjust this just a bit. So with this, I mean, the options in which to get this to, and for me, what I'm looking for is just getting a fat sound, because here's the thing. If I were to pull up something like multipass, and that's really like the biggest weakness with Serum as a whole, is that it's just super limited on effects, and almost every single neurobass tutorial from 2014 does not have something that's specifically or exclusively within phase plan. I know that because that's around the time that I was watching every single video on the internet. But just as a means of demonstration, if you get into your external processing here, right? At any point in time, you can jump off and start adding external effects into something on Serum in order to get the kind of basses that you want. But I wanted to kind of pre-frame this as a means of like, don't try to get everything from just this synth. You can definitely do some resampling, which we'll be doing here in a second. We can also make custom wavetables. We can do all that. But the more that you understand that just for this specific kind of sound design, we really, in my opinion, if you're really wanting to make more complex sounds, you're going to need more effects. So, you know, at what point do you say, okay, well, now I'm going to add Serum effects, or now I'm going to do this or whatever? What I would say is, let's say like you're so hell-bent on like, I'm only going to make a neurobass in Serum. Well, that's when you get into something like doing resampling. So we can resample to oscillator A and see what that looks like, or see how it sounds, if you will. So we can maybe even just pull the unison back off of this now and see what that sounds like. You can see that it feels more so like some kind of bandpass though, but there's a bunch of different waveforms in here, as you can see, so it might be worth kind of just scrolling through and seeing what you can find. Maybe something that's kind of reminiscent of a saw. That would probably, right there, that would probably be the closest thing that I've seen. Right, or what you can also do is you can pull this back in and say, okay, I'm just going to pick a really small part of this waveform because it's huge. There's a lot of tables through here that are drastically different. So it might be worth just taking a little piece of this and kind of moving it across to see what you can get. Cool. So from there, we can also, you know, start to implore some other things as well. Like it might be worth it to try to, again, reintroduce some kind of solid fundamental or something and go into like FM from B. We could turn this off and start to apply this now. we could do the same thing with detuning, see what that sounds like. And really from there, like the process can just go on and on and on and on with, and when it comes into doing resampling and stuff. But I do think that behind this, one of the biggest things that you're going to kind of have to like figure out a workaround for is just the lack of a sheer number of filters, right? Very quickly, if I were to kind of just expand upon this here, if I were to even just grab something like an EQ and go like this and go like this and go like this, doesn't even matter really. But even something along these lines, and I were to put, we'll do an LFO so that way it's not just random. I tend to like to use random, to be honest, but once we have something like that, okay, now we can supplement that with another filter, so something kind of like so. And then let's just go ahead and use that little note trick to where this turns up the more that I play this. So we'll set this root note at D#1 and set this pitch range down to like 24. Even with just this, right, maybe we can make it a little bit more dramatic. Just by having a bunch of filters with this detune waveform is really going to do so many favors for us. And when it comes into like coloring, quote unquote, coloring the rest of the sound or whatever, the effects that you add to make it more spatial and stuff are relatively insignificant. It's about understanding the movement, you know, and about trying to create a phrase with what it is that you're trying to do. So if I were to set this to, let's say, off, let's say I also set this volume here to something like this, to say 100. Then these phrases that I'm making are going to be dependent on, or the interest of the phrase is going to be dependent on how I set this shape. So I could also go back to infinite and, but the same thing applies, is that once we have a basic form of a fat waveform and some very simple filter movement, then it's kind of the name of the game of how creative can you get with these different filter shapes, with these LFO shapes, and then doing a constant matter of resampling. So I don't know, I think that with this, when it comes into getting neurobass out of Serum and stuff, like there's a lot of presets and whatnot, a lot of people out there that have really good starting points, but I find that at least in today's day and age and expectation, it really does cater to be like, all right, I'm going to try to get as much done within Serum, and then I'm going to start looking at how I can transform the sound with the other tools that I have, whether it be through stock or whether it be through, you know, I'm sure that you've got some other third-party effects. And I kind of want to make a point before I end this video. If anybody's out there and you all are shopping for plugins, don't worry so much about synthesizers. Don't worry so much about, you know, what the most powerful VST instrument plugin is that can make your waffles. If you really are serious about sound design, invest in your effects, or really take the time to learn your DAWs effects if that's what you're using, because the more that you can exploit having an access of a wide range of things to modify a sound, the more that you are going to, it's going to take you so much further, right? You can only make, like, a synthesizer only has so many engines, and Faceplant to me is among the most robust. I guess you can consider Contact or something or whatever, even though it's mostly sample based. Falcon technically has a lot of options, but it's, for one, it's really convoluted to use. I've got a review on that somewhere else, but I would say that Faceplant probably has the most accessible and easy to use synth engines built into it. But even still, there are some things that it's missing. But it doesn't matter, because you can always source a strong waveform from a sample, right? You can literally take it out of a song, or you can borrow it from a sample pack and throw it into a sampler or something. So when it comes into the actual like waveform synthesis, it's not that big of a deal. There's a ton of things that can create wavetables, which that's what you're doing at the end of the day, which is shaping harmonics. But when it comes into morphing the sound and it comes into that aspect of transforming it, it's really going to come back to the effects. The effects are how you're going to make some really cool sounds, make it transform, and then obviously like you're only limited by the power of your CPU. But I guess just in an aspect of doing all this, you know, I think that Serum is definitely capable of giving you some strong starting points, and I wouldn't say that I've exhausted all the options that we have, but just know that for the most part, whenever you're doing stuff like this, I don't think that the effects for filtering are dramatic enough. Yeah, I'm trying to think about if there's any other things that I could talk about. I mean, you can morph these if you want to and process these signals in such a way that is going to kind of shift the waveform. But again, your best bet would probably be to come back into all of these and refortify your fundamental if you have to, and then kind of set something like this to where you go to frame 1, refortify your fundamental, go to frame 256, refortify that fundamental, highlight all of these, and make sure that your sub is working, morph them in between with the crossfade, and then you can, you know, again, just do more stuff with that. But yeah, I don't know. I guess at this point it's just kind of redundant with how you would transform the sound as a whole. But even still, I hope that that was somewhat interesting to you all. Again, go check out Noise's Patreon if you really want to know how Noisia makes their basses. I would much rather you get it straight from them than me give you a butchered version that most likely is not going to be up to your expectations about what you think you should be hearing from somebody like me that has been doing sound design for a long time. So with that out of the way, hopefully that video was informative to you just on a crash course of perspective and sound design and Serum as a whole. But yeah, let me know what you all think, and thank you so much for watching.